Biblical scholars have argued for years about the location of these holy sites. Now, one man says he might have found them.
For centuries, pilgrims have trekked to Egypt's Sinai Peninsula, convinced they were walking in Moses' footsteps. But what if everything we believed about history's most sacred location was wrong? Recent technological breakthroughs have uncovered evidence challenging 2,000 years of tradition. This mountain has been sealed off, guarded, and hidden from the world. Until now. The hidden peak. Deep in the Arabian desert lies Jabal al-Lawz, a mountain most people have never heard of. For decades, this site has been wrapped in mystery, cordoned off by Saudi military, and declared strictly forbidden. The official explanation involves archaeological preservation and security. But researchers using remote technology have been quietly studying the region, and their discoveries have sent shockwaves through academic circles. Advanced imaging systems swept across the restricted zone throughout the early 2020s. Teams utilized LIDAR technology combined with multispectral analysis that can detect variations invisible to human eyes. The objective was Jabal al-Lawz, a peak forbidden to independent investigation. When researchers examined the data, they weren't looking at random formations. The scans revealed organized linear features, angular patterns, and subsurface anomalies that appeared distinctly non-natural. This technology can penetrate sand and soil, exposing buried structures concealed for millennia. The data displayed geometric configurations and right angles that geologists argue rarely occur through natural processes alone. These aren't vague shadows or wishful interpretations. The imaging indicates possible underground chambers, symmetrical layouts, and evidence of planned construction on a massive scale. This discovery makes archaeologists reconsider fundamental assumptions. Similar technology transformed our understanding when it exposed sprawling infrastructure beneath Angkor Wat in Cambodia. Proponents argue that what's happening in Arabia could equally transform our comprehension of ancient Israelite history. But this raises a provocative question. The spatial analysis suggests an encampment of extraordinary dimensions, one that could support a population far exceeding typical nomadic groups. We're discussing an organized, densely populated temporary city. If accurate, this evidence could indicate that ancient accounts of mass exodus events might contain historical truth rather than pure mythology. The technology didn't just capture surface images. It contributed data to an intensifying debate about whether one of civilization's most significant religious narratives occurred in a completely different location. For nearly 1,700 years, the world has accepted Egypt's southern Sinai as the setting. If the Arabian hypothesis gains traction, it would require rewriting not just archaeological textbooks, but religious understanding across three major faiths. And here's where things get bizarre. When analysts examined the geometric configurations, they identified ratios and alignments too precise for random settlement patterns. Some researchers have compared these layouts to sophisticated urban planning or ritualistic architectural designs found worldwide. The precision required would demand logistical capabilities that seem extraordinary for wandering refugees. Unless they possessed organizational knowledge, conventional historical models have underestimated. The radar reveals what appear to be main pathways, segregated zones suggesting different functional areas, and a cleared central space that analysts interpret as deliberately maintained. This arrangement resonates with ancient descriptions of sacred boundaries around a holy mountain. The layout demonstrates what proponents view as intentional civil engineering. Control points, movement corridors, and defensive perimeters all appear in the data. If you were coordinating a massive displaced population in an unforgiving desert, this represents one model for structuring their settlement. This brings us to the geographical controversy. Why would Mount Sinai be in Arabia rather than Egypt? And if it is, why has the scholarly establishment been searching in the wrong place for 2 millennia? The theory that Mount Sinai sits in Arabia isn't modern. It traces back to ancient texts. Advocates point to a passage in Galatians where Paul states that Mount Sinai is in Arabia. For centuries, this was interpreted broadly, but supporters now argue it was a precise geographical designation. The debate centers on whether Paul intended literal directions or employed Arabia as theological metaphor. Ancient maps reveal that Egypt's boundaries historically ended west of the Sinai Peninsula. Crossing the Gulf of Aqaba would place you in the region associated with Midian, which scholars situate in northwestern Arabia. This connects to Moses fleeing Egypt prior to the Exodus. He journeyed specifically to Midian, resided there 40 years, and married into a Midianite family. It was in Midian where he encountered the burning bush. If the mountain of God was associated with Midian in these accounts, the sacred peak could have been east of the Gulf of Aqaba. However, tradition exercises tremendous influence. During the 4th century, Constantine and his mother Helena identified holy sites throughout the empire. By the time Justinian constructed St. Catherine's Monastery in the 6th century, the Egyptian site was permanently enshrined as Mount Sinai, primarily through tradition rather than archaeological confirmation. But here's the critical issue. There exists no definitive archaeological evidence in Egypt's Sinai supporting the Exodus as a large-scale encampment. No pottery fragments, no camp remnants, and no material artifacts conclusively tied to a massive population from the Late Bronze Age. This silence has provided ammunition for critics. However, shifting the search eastward to northwestern Arabia, a far less studied region, opens new possibilities, though proof remains elusive. Jabal al-Lawz occupies a region notoriously difficult for outsiders to access. Saudi authorities maintain strict restrictions, citing archaeological protection and security. While not officially designated as Mount Sinai, it hasn't been trampled by tourists like Egypt's traditional location. It has remained comparatively undisturbed, awaiting modern technology and future fieldwork to unlock its secrets. The geography surrounding Jabal al-Lawz has been described as consistent with biblical descriptions, including an expansive plain near the mountain. There exists a massive level area fronting the peak, large enough to accommodate an enormous temporary population. The traditional Egyptian site is encircled by rugged valleys that would complicate vast encampment logistics. In Arabia, the landscape opens dramatically, providing the space necessary for a tent city that remote sensing may hint at. This reorientation addresses certain logistical questions, but opens new mysteries. If this location is authentic, what else lies there? Remote sensing can suggest subsurface features, but the surface hasn't undergone systematic excavation, leaving claims unresolved. There's also an unsettling dimension to its forbidden status. Why has military presence guarded it so intensively? Official explanations attribute security to border control and heritage preservation. Yet independent commentators suggest the restrictions aren't solely about archaeology. Rumors circulate about unusual electromagnetic anomalies, though no peer-reviewed studies have confirmed such effects. Could the holy ground described in texts be associated with extraordinary but natural geological phenomena? The fence displays warnings of an archaeological area, but armed patrols remain standard for protecting sensitive sites. No publicly documented discoveries currently confirm extraordinary artifacts. What lies inside remains unknown rather than actively suppressed. The most arresting feature of Jabal al-Lawz is its summit. The mountaintop appears dramatically blackened, contrasting sharply with the reddish-brown granite dominating the surrounding range. From a distance it resembles a shadow, but close examination reveals the rocks themselves are visibly darker. Supporters reference the biblical description of the mountain smoking like a furnace. Geologists note that the darkened summit likely consists of naturally darker igneous material or weathered basalt rather than scorched granite. Nevertheless, the sharp color transition has been interpreted by some as consistent with descriptions of fire descending from above. Some observers suggest the summit appears scorched from the top down. A few commentators have compared the surface texture to vitrified stone, a process requiring extreme heat, though no peer-reviewed study has confirmed true vitrification. The temperatures necessary to alter granite this way are immense. At the mountain's base lies another cited anomaly, a massive boulder approximately 60 feet high, split cleanly down its center. It sits atop a small rise in a manner that draws attention. The fracture is precise, and the stone displays erosion patterns including smooth channels in a region receiving little rainfall. Some interpret this as evidence of ancient water flow. Geologists attribute such features to episodic flash flooding over extended periods, though proponents associate the formation with Moses striking a rock to produce water. The split boulder invites comparisons to the famous al-Lawz formation in Saudi Arabia, known for its nearly perfect vertical fracture. Geologists explain such formations as resulting from natural stress fractures along fault lines, shaped over time by erosion. Despite this, their appearance has fueled speculation. No archaeological evidence supports the use of advanced technology at the site. Attention then shifts to stone structures near the mountain. Remote sensing and surface observation have identified formations some interpret as man-made platforms or altars, though their purpose and age remain uncertain. Nearby petroglyphs depict bulls and cattle, imagery common across the Arabian Peninsula and spanning many cultures and eras. While some connect this imagery to the biblical golden calf, scholars caution that such depictions cannot be definitively linked to that narrative, particularly given their widespread regional presence. Remote sensing has also identified linear subsurface features. The biblical text describes boundaries established around the mountain. Straight or semi-linear anomalies detected by radar could correspond to such boundaries, though they could also result from natural geological layering. Interpretation depends heavily on assumptions rather than confirmed excavation. The argument that absence of evidence equals evidence of absence is a logical trap. When examining the lifestyle described in the texts, the Israelites are portrayed as a largely mobile population living in tents, not city builders constructing stone temples. According to the narrative, they remained in specific locations for limited periods before moving onward. Archaeologists understand that nomadic camps leave exceedingly faint traces. Ash from cooking fires disperses in the wind. Latrine pits decompose. Tent impressions vanish under shifting sand. After 3,500 years, expecting a clean, visible layer of pottery on the surface is unrealistic. There's also a historical parallel often cited in discussions of cultural disappearance, the 10 lost tribes of Israel. In 722 BC, the Assyrian Empire conquered the northern kingdom of Israel and deported large portions of its population. Biblical texts describe the tribes as scattered, and historical records show their distinct identities gradually fading from the written record. The scale of the deportations is debated, but the outcome is clear. Many were assimilated, their culture diluted, their material traditions blending into surrounding populations. If an entire kingdom can lose its identifiable cultural signature in the archaeological record during the Iron Age, how much easier would it be for a mobile group of refugees to leave no clear trace in the Bronze Age? The Assyrian exile demonstrates that large populations can disappear archaeologically without vanishing biologically. The absence of a distinct Israelite pottery layer at Mount Sinai is not proof against the narrative, but one of the central challenges scholars debate when evaluating a transient population in a harsh environment. Another possibility is practical. The lack of debris may reflect sanitation practices described in the text. The Israelites are instructed to bury waste outside the camp. In addition, many everyday materials like wooden containers, leather goods, and woven fibers are biodegradable. If tools were organic, little would survive millennia in a desert climate. Why are there no Egyptian records of the Exodus? Egyptologists note that ancient Egypt was a culture of political messaging. Pharaohs recorded victories, not defeats. They erased disgraced rulers from monuments. Periods of crisis were downplayed or omitted. A mass collapse involving slaves, plagues, and the destruction of a royal army would not have been commemorated. The silence in Egyptian records aligns with known practices, though it cannot confirm the biblical account. Proponents argue that drone and satellite analyses help bridge this gap. They point to large-scale spatial patterns, possible boundaries, and organized layouts that could survive when smaller artifacts disappear. These features are interpreted as the skeletal outline of an encampment. The presence of Midianite pottery and ancient mining operations shows the area was active during the Late Bronze Age. Whether this activity can be directly linked to the Exodus remains unresolved. The silence of the desert is not emptiness, it is ambiguity. While drone data and remote sensing have reignited the debate, they have not delivered final answers, only new questions. What remains is a collection of geological features, archaeological hints, and textual parallels that some see as converging evidence, while others view them as coincidence. The site offers questions, not conclusions. What's your take? Does this evidence finally identify the authentic Mount Sinai? Or is it another desert mirage? Share your thoughts in the comments below and hit that subscribe button if you enjoyed this deep dive into one of history's most enduring mysteries.